My nose is running. Anyway, welcome to Punky's World. Excuse me. I have a cold. Anyway. Oops. That is for the wrestling video for Saturday. My dad. If you recall yesterday, I did a biography of my mom. So today I decided to do my dad. My dad was born April 9th, 1944. Which means he was born during World War II. In Hartford, Connecticut. When my father was 3 months old, a major tragedy happened in Hartford, Connecticut. The Hartford Circus fire. I will put in the cards a link to my video about a kid who's missing since the fire, where you get more information on the fire and the fact that I have a family member who actually died in it. It was a distant cousin, not too distant, but distant cousin of my dad's, a couple times removed. He didn't know her, but she was only 6 herself at the time. When he was about 2 or 3, his parents came to where my grandmother was from and where her family lived. My grandmother had been born here in Douglas in 1912, June 17th, and her family had moved to the neighboring village of Manchog, from the village of East Douglas, where I live, in Douglas, to which they no longer call it East Douglas. To Manchog, which is a small French village in Sutton. Everybody there was related in one way or another, and they were all French-Canadian. Called Manchog. We've been there. We've talked about it. He had his first job at the age of 10 as a paper boy. He attended Boy Scouts with his lifelong best friend, Bob. My father was born Robert Wilson Jr., called Bobby by his family and Willie by his friends. They even repeatedly told the story about meeting Ted Williams. It was back in the 50s. They were out fishing, and one of their friends that knew Ted Williams, and Ted Williams was a big angler, and had brought him to fish. They didn't know who the heck it was. Sure, they collected baseball cards, mostly put them in the spokes of their bike to make noise, which is why those cards are so valuable now. Excuse me. Until he was introduced to them and they realized, holy cow, they both wished they had gotten an autograph or something. But one of my father's favorite stories to tell was of going to the 1964 World's Fair in New York. He loved talking about that. He said it was a long, painful ride, though, because he had gotten into a small car accident and broken his collarbone a couple weeks before. So he was in pain. And he still had a lump on his collarbone where he had broken it. And he had a lump on his leg where he had broken that in a car accident, where he had severe internal damage and almost didn't make it. In fact, I didn't tell him that, because he had 2 closest friends, Bob and Roger. Those were his 2 best friends. And Roger died in the accident. They didn't tell my father for a long time because they thought it would kill him. The shock. My dad got married the first time in 1964, was divorced 11 months later in 1965. My dad was 20 years old So he had to have his mother sign, because back in that time period, a boy had to be 21 to get married without parental consent, and a girl had to be 18. I know you're probably scratching your head on that one, but the fact of the matter is they felt that girls were more mature than boys, because we do mature at a faster rate, because we start going through changes at a faster rate than boys in terms of puberty and stuff like that. So his wife was about 5 months pregnant at the time, and he never met his daughter. She was put in foster care and later adopted. I did find her after his death. At his request, he did not want to be rejected. He couldn't take that. His heart couldn't take that. And he was right, because she rejected me. Maybe someday she'll change her mind. I just wanted her to know he always loved her. She always had a dad that thought of her, that loved her. He had the wrong information, basically. Like I said, I'm here if she changes her mind. In 1973, my dad married my mom, and I was born in August of 74, 1 year later. My father's father was born in Broadbrook, Connecticut, in 1900, and as I mentioned, his mom was born here in 1912. I was born in Manchog. Well, I was born in a hospital in the city, but I was born in Manchog. I came home to Manchog. That's where I graduated school. If you ask me, I'm from Manchog. Did I grow up in Douglas? Absolutely. I grew up in Douglas. This is my hometown in that sense. But where was I born? Manchog. I'm a Chaw guy. I remember I was an adult when the house that I came home to when I was a baby burnt to the ground. And it wasn't far from where we were living. You could see the smoke and stuff. And someone who knew them since way back then called and said, that's your old house. What? And we took a drive by, and it was pretty much gone. And I remember my father crying. My mother was pretty emotional too, but I remember my father crying. I said, I'm sorry, Daddy. He said, it's okay. He said, I lived there. He said, it's hard because I lived there from the time I was, 14, 15, up until you were a baby. So he lived there from the time he was 14 or 15 until he was 32. Because I was about a year and a half, 2 years old when we moved to Douglas the first time. Then we moved to Millbury, back to Douglas. Now we moved to Douglas, Oxford, Millbury, back to Douglas. 2 places in Millbury, back to Douglas. My father worked in the woolen mill my entire childhood, my entire 20s, my entire 30s, until they closed down when he was 62. My dad was a second-generation American. His paternal grandparents were born in Northern Ireland, and he was a third-generation American on my grandmother's side because her grandmother was born in Quebec. Excuse me. So, the thing I remember about my dad that makes me smile and laugh, besides his daddyisms, the way he talked and stuff like that, was his childlike sense of humor. pulling little pranks, like putting shaving cream in my bed, or he pulled other little pranks on me. Or I was always into wrestling, and he came in my bedroom for no apparent reason. Actually, it wasn't my bedroom then. It was just a sitting room then. This particular room had different guises over the years, because we had 3 bedrooms, but it was technically 2 and like a sitting room outside the master, which became my bedroom at one point because it was bigger, but it didn't have a closet, so legally it's not a bedroom. And so anyway, he came in and tore his shirt off and pretended to be Hulk Hogan. Just silly things like that, just to make me laugh. So he enjoyed making me laugh. Oh. Anyway, excuse me for sneezing. Oh, yuck. My goodness. Anyway, so yeah, that was my dad. And it was funny. I met with the lady who takes care of me from the Department of Developmental Services, my worker. And we were talking because she's French as well. And I said, because my father was bilingual, I thought things like put something in your feet was just a thing because of his double language, having to do with grammar with his double language. She said, that's a French thing. And she busted out laughing. She said, they all say that. So it was nice to hear it from someone else that is a French thing, which is what I always thought. I always thought it was I always thought it was weird, but I always thought it had to do with his bilingualness. He never learned to read French, though. He could read and write in English. He couldn't read and write in French, but he could speak it. They just never taught him. My grandmother could do it all. My grandmother was known for swearing in French. I try to keep their language alive in little ways. Like when I'm moving my tripod legs, I don't say 1, 2, 3 as I'm counting them. I say un, deux, trois. My father taught me to count to 10, but I cannot remember the rest. I can remember 1, 2, 3. I know the word for pig, cochon. Because my father called me that because I took a bite of a sandwich. We were having a picnic on the deck over there, and it jettisoned all over my shirt. And I said, what does that mean? He said, it's French. It means pig. My mother and I burst out laughing. Every once in a while, he would just say something in French, and we both go. I was so scared that as his dementia was getting worse, that he would revert to French and neither one of us would have any idea what he was saying. But he eventually couldn't speak, so that wasn't an issue. But he could have very easily reverted. Some people do that. Towards the end of life, they'll revert back. Because I'm sure before he went to school that he probably spoke both because his dad spoke English. But he probably spoke a lot of French. His brothers really didn't speak it. He had to speak it or his grandmother wouldn't talk to him. I think my Uncle David said the same thing, but my Uncle David never used it. If they used it with each other, they would have kept it better. But my father got to use it with my bonus godfather, my godmother's second husband. Because he was from far northern Maine, where Amy is from. And so he spoke French. So they would speak French, playing cards, and my mother and my aunt would be, my godmother, I called her my aunt, would be looking at each other, and the guys would be strategizing, and they'd be going. She just started laughing. She said, "Yep, that sounds about right." Because they would be saying numbers to each other and stuff in French, and so that was pretty cool. So anyway, thank you so much for listening to this story about my dad, whose birthday's coming right up. God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Don't forget to check in tomorrow as we go over the new headset. Bye, guys. God bless you. Please subscribe.